Welcome to Revive Mercy Podcast. It's January 2022, and we're getting more into January. And I would, in this new year, new month, we're starting a new theme called Freedom to Move Forward. My wife and I have a calendar that's filled with less popular awareness holidays, and one of them, actually, when this episode comes out, and when you're listening to it, it'll be January 13th. And it's Make Your Dreams Come True Day. I don't know, I messed it up, but Come True Day. I don't know how true this is, but I thought it was fun. Every 365 days, there's supposed to be some uncommon day. And I also want to share that we have a new guest today. Her name is Lois. Focuses on shame and guilt, and her passion is show the way to self-love. And I want to say thank you, Lois, for coming on and sharing with us a little bit, your insight on everything.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, especially on a Sunday, a holy day.
Yes. I also want to say, I tried. My wife has this book. It says untranslatable words, and I'm gonna butcher how you say this is in Swedish. It's res the bear. It says the restless beat of a traveler's heart before the journey begins. A mixture of anxiety, anticipation. A lot of us might be feeling like that as the year of 2022 starts to roll in, and as we're just like, what's next? There's so much uncertainty, there's so much fear, there's so much, we hope for the change to be, we hope the change will be hopeful, but hope cannot exist without uncertainty. So I just want to say thank you, Lois, for coming in and sharing your insight. I want to share with those who are listening, if you are in crisis in the United States, at least, you can call 1-800-273-8255. I do encourage those around the world to find what is available, what resources are available in your area. This month is also commemorates Martin Luther King Jr., and I use one of his quotes. It says, "You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step." What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
Yes. Well, the first step is to know, contrary to what's out there, because I'm the only one talking about this at this point in this framework, that shame, guilt, energy does not belong to us. It's not ours to own or to give. That's step number one.
Okay.
That's a big step.
Okay.
But I can validate that with more talking.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. For me, when it comes to, I'm just always encouraged of all different kind of guests I have, and this is just such a safe place for everyone to share what has helped and what is helping them. And obviously, the listeners have been very respondent. So I just want to say thank you, Lois, for sharing your insight again. Before we get into hearing your story, Lois, and anything regarding I just want to talk about the monthly topic. I try to put a lot of thought into like each month. Last year was a brave new world in January because it was 2020 into 2021, a lot of changes. Now people are kind of tired of hearing about
changes.
Tired of all the changes. We just want to move forward. So when you see this topic, freedom to move forward, what comes to mind for you, Lois?
Know that the fear that we all have inhabited, because we've been so inundated with this, to do this, do that, don't do that, you'll get this, you'll get sick, you'll die. I mean, we've been heavily corrupted, and it doesn't matter what country you're living in. It's worldwide, so you can't blame the government or anything else. It's just whoever's doing it, we got it all. So fear is the result of shame, guilt, energy.
Can you explain a little bit more about that energy that you just mentioned?
Okay, now I need to backtrack and need to think a little bit differently. What happens? We have positive emotions and we have negative emotions.
Yes.
We have love energy.
Mm-hmm.
Love energy gives us joy, self-confidence, happiness, empowered. We love each other. We have enough energy. We think we're smart. We know we're smart. We can do things. We don't procrastinate because we know we can do it. We have confidence. We have love. We have joy. We have compassion. We have intuition. We have all these beautiful, wonderful things that God gave us. However, we have shame, guilt, energy that turns our positive emotions into negative. We are already positive. God made us that way. But shame, guilt, energy came in and went flip. Our compassion turns to depression. Our intuition turns to anxiety.
Yeah.
Our passion turns to anger.
It's interesting, when I think about all this topic of shame and guilt and all this stuff, I just reminded of how important our mindset is more than anything else. How we view and perceive. Like I look at a group of people who are, maybe they experience domestic violence in their lives, right? But they share, and it's a safe place, and they share, and they feel comfortable, they feel safe. They bond and they feel better and they do better. And for me, when you're talking about these kind of things, it's encouraging because a lot of things cannot be measured. We'd like to measure everything with some certainty, some measurable parameters that says, if I do this, this will happen. But it's more how we view and how we, at least from my experience, how we look at there's this idea of reframing a certain event in your life. We're going to go through hardship, but at the same time, I look at also Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man Finding Meaning, and how he saw people giving half their bread, doing all this stuff for the other people who are in the concentration camp, and they did better because they felt that there was another day coming. They felt hope was upon them, as opposed to, I need to collect all my measurable resources and I need to secure them in this anxiety and fear. I don't know if this relates directly, but I do like what you're talking about when it comes to choosing to love someone, choosing to embrace that emotion versus bitterness and anger. If someone's wronged you, in the Bible, at least for me, it says you have to try to make amends with them. No matter how right you are, there's a lot of smart people, but not a lot of wise people when it comes to that regards.
And that's exactly where I'm going. Now, we all know this, but why do we flip into the depression hole, the negative hole? It's because shame, guilt, energy. So we need to take that out of the equation, and then we're okay. Now, what happens? I'll give you an example. What happens to your computer when it gets a virus?
It freezes up. It doesn't work well. Your program, everything goes bad.
We could say some cuss words, but we're going to be kind. So what do? You have a virus removal program.
Yeah.
And then hopefully it works.
Yeah.
Shame, guilt. We are a computer. We are an energy being created by God. And we have all these ley lines and different sorts of lines inside of us that are meridians. We don't have to go into basically an energy machine. Now, shame, guilt, and energy, negative energy comes into us, and what happens to us, the computer? Our positive emotions go negative. Our mindset changes. We are no good. We cannot do that. We're victims.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why this first concept, this first step is to know it's an energy that comes from the outside into us, and we own it. It's part of us. And I'm telling you, the first part is it's a trickster.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it funny because it's like, do you ever go to a magician show?
Yeah.
and the illusion. This is what shame guilt energy is. It only has one defect. The defect is it dissolves in detection.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting? So that's what Lois does. I kick the black curtain off, like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz, they open the curtain and they see the wizard making all the. Okay, that's who shame guilt energy is. It's a trick that has been placed upon humanity. That's another story for another day.
Yes. Well,
but we have to get to the point to know that it's an energy that affects our emotions. Of course we feel shame, but what do you feel when you feel shame? I'm not good enough. I'm depressed. So I'm saying, don't go into the shame guilt trap. You can have remorse for something you did that wasn't correct, and you can move forward with that. But don't carry the guilt, because you're carrying that energy, and then you can help heal the depression and anxiety and everything else. But you won't be able to heal it until you take that force of shame guilt energy out.
Yes. And I find this whole conversation very interesting, because when I'm thinking about shame and guilt and all these kind of negative emotions, I also think about some of the biggest hurdles in society, like from the people I come across, is communication, being able to communicate well, and also accountability. I say this to a lot of my peers and some of my clients. Accountability is not a bad word when it's a safe place. The only way you can have it a safe place is if it's not filled with shame and guilt. If it's shame and guilt ridden, then there's no room.
No, because shame is an illusion. It's like a cloud, and it comes over us. My new film, I'm Good Film.com, is free. Its first episode's out, 15 minutes, and I show you on film what shame guilt energy looks like. Okay, so we get a visual. Remember, you believe what you see. And I'm showing you what it looks like. And it's just an illusion of energy that comes over you. Like the grace of God, like the black shame comes over you as well.
And just diving into this conversation, obviously all of this makes sense, at least to me. The idea of not being filled with shame or guilt is something I think a lot of us, maybe those listening, would understand. But why do you think people tend to lean towards shame and guilt so much?
Because it's heavier. It's more profound. When you feel shame, guilt, you feel like you're carrying a 500-pound sack. When you feel God and light and love, it's more, hi, sweetie, how are you? It's not as approachable.
Yeah.
Shame guilt is like sock you in the face and in the heart, you fall down. Love kind of carries you and kisses you. So we have to get out of that dense, lower vibration. You just say no. Like Nike says, just do it. Just say no. And I got one in my film that shows you how to do that.
Okay, and those who are listening, will be putting that link in the notes and description. I find this conversation also very intriguing, because in my field, I work with clients. Is a lot of this shame and guilt transcend culture, economic, social backgrounds, and doesn't matter how educated you are. Some of the most tragic situations I've experienced is when someone loses someone, and they hold on to that bitterness. They don't go through the process of grief or processing to go through that grief, and then they hold on to the shame of what could I have done more. For me,
so instead of being stuck there like flypaper, say, okay, I'm not going to say shame guilt. I'm going to say I have regret that I did that. Okay, regret makes you move on. Regret, like you said, you can make compensation to someone that you did something that wasn't inappropriate. That's a good thing. That's not bad. Do it out of love of your heart. Don't do it because I feel guilty.
Yeah. I think guilty, at least from the context and the verbiage that we're mentioning, is it's less helpful because all it does is kind of mask what you're not really addressing. If I make a mistake, I will say, I'm sorry, Lois, I made a mistake, and you move forward from that, as opposed to saying, try and mask it and feel guilt, and then you hold on to that, the heaviness.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Right.
And then the old saying is, hurt people. So eventually you'll become more and more hurt, and the people you surround, you become more of a toxic influence around those who you even love. And that will build on the guilt. They'll build on the guilt and shame that you're already having at the same time. I find this, because it's almost, it's something, just as I always express in my podcast a lot of times, we don't communicate well. We kind of assume we do, but we also kind of, when it comes to these topics that seem like, well, I'm supposed to have guilt. Sometimes I even ask my clients, when it comes to or some of my people in my life, I'm like, do you have a hobby? Do you like to do something? And you'll be surprised at how many people don't even know or feel that they deserve to be happy or have something enjoyable to do because they're consumed with all this guilt and shame that you're talking about as part of it.
Guilt. Okay. Yeah. Now I say shame, guilt. I don't say shame and guilt because shame is in the unconscious mind and guilt's in the conscious mind.
Okay.
But it's the same energy. You will never, ever, 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 ever get rid of guilt until you release the shame that's making the guilt. Okay. That's a second step. Know that shame makes guilt. Okay. So it's like, you have a fire, and if you pour gasoline on a fire. So if you have guilt, you put more gas on it, you're going to have more guilt because you added the shame.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I started to see. So for me, I've seen how much the guilt and shame in families have destroyed
the family.
Destroyed the family,
everything.
Even this is where the old saying, good intentions. They may have good intentions, but they hold on to this
contaminated energy. It's a contamination. It contaminates you.
Mm-hmm. One thing I like also, I've been saying also, is it's okay to not be okay. It's a saying, but it kind of, it dispenses on the guilt because it allows you to process and this month move forward. If it's okay to be not okay, means forget about the guilt you're trying to hold on to, and let's try from tangible ways to move forward. I was also reading that when it comes to problems, there's two ways to actually look at it. There's emotional coping skills. There's emotional coping skills, the things you cannot change at the moment. That's the most important thing. At the moment. And then there's things that are more practical. And so, my leg, I have a broken arm, or my arm hurts, I go to the doctor. That's something that you can actually make steps right now to change or try to get better. So I tell this to people because sometimes, because of the heavy guilt or heaviness of what's going on, they can't even differentiate what the problem is. So they do there could be a practical answer, they just have to go to the doctor or do something more practical, but they treat everything like emotional, so it gets heavier and heavier.
So when you're in that state, say shame, guilt is an energy. It's a trickster. It's an addition trickster on me, and I say no. Now, does it go away? In your mind, you can start the course change. That's what we're doing. You're doing the same thing. You're going, okay, you're going down this street. It's a bad end. So we're changing a course direction. Now, you
Mm-hmm.
may not see the end of the street, you don't see how you're going to do it, but you put in your mind, I'm having a course correction because shame, guilt does not belong to me. I don't understand what Lois is saying, but hey, it's a lot better than what I'm feeling.
And it goes back to the quote, that I said before. You don't have to see the whole entire staircase. Just take the
The
first
first
step.
step. And the first step is shame, guilt is not mine to own or to give.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step is I feel horrible, I feel depressed. Okay, let's talk about depression. And another thing is when people talk, they say, oh, it's such a shame it's raining today. I can't go out shopping. Well, don't use shame words. Don't say shame. You can
Mm-hmm.
say it's sad that it's raining, it's unfortunate, but don't use the word shame or guilt in your vocabulary, except when we're doing, counseling.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel guilty. No, I feel sad. I feel regret. I
Yeah.
feel lost. But don't use the word shame yet because they have a certain energy and it puts you into the prison of whole, of not good enough.
Yeah, and from what my experience hearing those words, it never really ends the idea. There's never ever a solution if you kind of go in that cycle of guilt and shame, because you can never make up. If someone I know who a friend who that I lost, that passed away, I can have that guilt, but there's no resolution at that point because the guilt will continue to resonate. And there might be some good days, but I'll never really be able to pass that experience because I'm holding on to that guilt. And this is not like obviously, so
Energy.
yeah, and this is not easy to do at first, but it's like I said, and like we've been saying, don't look at the entire staircase. Look at the first step, and then go from there. I want to ask you, Lois, would you mind sharing what made you prompt you to help other people? What's your story? Why is it so important for you to help? And for those listening,
Well, I've always inspire others and to be healthy. That was
mm-hmm.
my MO. I had a very abusive childhood, broken bones, head traumas,
Mm-hmm.
even had a near death experience, so forth and so on. But I didn't remember that until I was 40.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. I was dyslexic and couldn't read, but eventually I achieved and I started the first kidney dialysis unit in the United States. I was, a big lecturer. I had 3 children. I lost 3 babies, but I had 3 babies. So there was a lot of trauma, but like I was always able to go and keep going. And I always talked to God. I thought everybody did, but
Mm-hmm.
I realized that most people don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a near death experience. So from a kid like 5, 6 years old, I've been talking to God or another dimension. Okay, so in my 40s, my broken bones and my head traumas and everything collapsed upon me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very, very sick and dying because I had 30 headaches and I took medication for that. So eventually God led me to a healer chiropractor and he helped, fix my body, which is a major, major thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to deal with the emotional impact of being bruised and beaten and thrown down steps and laughed at because I had dyslexia, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And I did go to therapy because I was suicidal.
Yeah.
And that really woke me up like, oh my God, am I that bad that I want to kill myself? Well, without you, I had those feelings. So I did do therapy and it helped.
Yeah.
Robert, it did help. I didn't want to commit suicide, but I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
I still was depressed, but I didn't want to kill myself. So that's a step up.
Yeah.
And then one day someone asked me, I was in a study group, and they said, what do you do about shame? I go, that's an odd word. I never heard it. This is in the 19, this is around like 2000. We did not at that time. So I went to the library and I did some research, and Bradshaw had talked about it as a sickness of the soul. And I got into it, and God helped me on this. I realized that I didn't have to go to therapy for depression or anxiety or self-esteem. I just had to look at shame, guilt, energy, because then I could get rid of the negative part of myself and turn it positive. So I looking at shame, and because I have an inner sight, I could actually see the shame, guilt, energy within me, the interpersonal parts, and I healed myself. And I look like 20 years younger. People going, what are you doing? We want to do it. I mean, anybody that gets youth, they want to do it. So I showed them what I was doing. I was talking to my inner self and releasing the shame, guilt that I held on to. And they got well within a couple weeks, who had been in therapy for years. And so that spread. You know, their cousins came, their mothers and their aunts and the kids. And so I was so excited that all people had to do was to release the shame and guilt, and it would turn their life around. But people didn't want me to speak because, no, you can't talk about shame and guilt. It doesn't exist. I was like so frustrated. So the pandemic came, and everybody says, oh, we got shame and guilt. Please talk, please talk. And I went, okay. Years, like, what the heck? And I see so much magic in everybody I speak to, that their life totally flips. Some do it in a couple hours, some do it in a couple months. It depends on where you are. But just the fact of knowing that shame, guilt doesn't belong to us changes people's lives. And I know that that's my mission. My mission is to help humanity evolve, to go forward. Like you said, freedom forward. We don't have freedom if we're carrying shame, guilt. That's it.
Yeah, and I really like during this pandemic, you mentioned that in the beginning. I was before I started this podcast, I was just doing events in where I'm at, and I remember saying, "Oh, I guess I'll try it." And it was 2019 October. It was before the pandemic, and I just remember thinking to myself, how's you're mentioning like shame and guilt. I also was trying to understand boundaries, because a lot of times boundaries are not able to be set up because of the shame and guilt. You're like, well, I have to be everyone and everyone. I have to save the world. So, sometimes the people I see who are struggling are the ones trying to save the world. And
you got to save yourself first.
Exactly. So I feel that a lot of this is relatable. In many regards, I know that every case, especially in my line of work, that a lot of situations are complicated, but at the same time, I've seen that shame and guilt are very heavy subjects that a lot of times don't address. I'm not like for me, I never like to lean on because life is way too complicated, but I would say in regards to shame and guilt is something that I would encourage those listening, those who are watching, whatever, to consider, because whatever you're doing, whatever you're trying to change your life in certain ways, lose weight, get better, you're going through stress or anxiety, you're going through a loss, shame and guilt will never help you along that track. I'll tell you that right away from my own experience. And I feel that the holistic approach is what I kind of attach, and I do love hearing these ideas that most people don't even consider. So I do appreciate you, Lois, and sharing your insight. I want to ask you, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with my listeners, those who are... I'm going to put the link of the video that people could check out. Anything else you'd like to share in regards?
Yeah, on my website, loishollis.com, I have a book called Now is the Time. I do readings from spirit. God talks, I write. I'm his secretary. Okay, so the writings I write are interesting in that the fact that the words come together in a different format. If you read these words, it connects you to a higher source than a lower. So if you're in deep shame, guilt, feelings, and you can't get out, read these words that God gave me, and it's free. I have it on my website. You can download it. And these words will help get you out so you can think about another option. Because when you're in the shame, guilt hole, you can't get out by yourself sometimes. So I always have shame, guilt buddies. You know, people that, like, if you know me, like, okay, I'm really depressed, I can't get out, and you would talk me out of it.
Yeah, it's you know, that's where I love
these
how
words, what can be like your shame, guilt buddy.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a lot of times, you know, the word accountability, or, you know, like you mentioned, shame, guilt buddies, or the buddy system in general, is not a bad thing when you trust the person and there's someone you can really, you know, it's building on that. I want to be better than I was yesterday. A lot of times in life we kind of focus on obtaining things instead of becoming something else. So I just want to I want to say thank you for agreeing to be a guest with us today. Lois, I'll get all the information and we'll put it, those who are listening, those who are watching, it'll be in the notes. Remember that each week we have a new guest, or we have new topics each month, but you can always stay tuned by going to reviveministriesfl.com. And I will be also, like I said, I'll be sharing Lois's website in the notes. This is goodbye for now from Revive Ministry Podcast, leaving you with this last quote. It's from Maya Angelou. It says, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them."